Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Economic Matters Committee. Today is Friday, March 6th, our first Friday bill hearing. Hopefully not too many of these. Welcome to all of you joining us, and we apologize for the delay. We had a voting session prior to this hearing. For those of you who may be new to the committee, the bill sponsors, the presenters, they are not timed, but we do respectfully request that you keep it under 3 minutes if at all possible. Those who will be testifying before us, you are timed 2 minutes. You will be clocked. If you're caught by the clock, we would respectfully request that you wrap it up and not continue to read your script. We prefer you speak from the heart, as it usually gets the message across better that way. Also, if you have provided written testimony, it is in our files, and each member has a copy of that on our laptops. We do also ask that you not duplicate what is said before you. You can always shorten it up, and again, most direct message is best. If you have signed up, those of you who will be testifying, you know who you are because you would have received a confirmation for your signing up. If you did not receive one, then you did not sign up. And I will also specify, if you did try to sign up and did not receive a confirmation, you may have tried, but it was not confirmed. So please don't come up to the table to testify, as we do want to respect those who did follow the process, and because there are timelines. It's not just a matter of signing up, it's within deadlines and timelines. So we respectfully request your cooperation. And with that said, we have 6 bills on our docket, and we will begin with House Bill 1296. Delegate Terrassa, if you have a panel with you, you may bring them up with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got Baco here with me today. Although I believe they're signed up.
Favorable with amendment.
Favorable with amendment.
But we're there.
We're there. We got it. All right. All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Economic Matters Committee, and also welcome to Ways and Means. For the record, I'm Delegate Jen Terrassa, here to present HB 1296, which is a bill about making sure your children are safe on their way to school. When school boards make decisions about routes to school and bus eligibility, parents of non-bus riders need to decide the safest way for their children to get to school. This is an easier task in some areas than others. In areas designated as school walking zones, some families find that there are no sidewalks or pathways for their children to walk to school, and that the only possible routes require children to walk along busy roads or cross busy intersections, or they have to figure out some way to find a ride, and that's possible for some and not for others. Committee members may recall a horrific incident that happened in Prince George's County in November 2023, when a truck struck and killed 2 children who were walking to Riverdale Elementary School. On a national level, though, nearly 800 school children lose their lives each year, and over 150,000 are injured on their way to school. And that's according to the National Academy's Transportation Research Board. I think we can agree that is unacceptable. These numbers underscore the urgent need for pedestrian infrastructure that can protect our children and reduce these devastating statistics. To address this serious issue, HB 1296 makes sure how kids in a new development will get to school is considered early in the housing development process. HB 1296 will require developers to prepare and submit a report on safe routes to school as part of a preliminary subdivision or site plan if the residential development project is located within a walking zone. The bill's proposed reports would include identification and assessment of hazards along the route to school, and if hazards exist, developers will have to propose what mitigation measures may be needed to make sure kids get to school safely, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school. However, the amended bill, to be clear, the developer will not be required to complete any of these unless the county would otherwise be able to require such improvement, or they negotiate with the developers, but nothing to do with this bill. Note, I have another bill that's, unfortunately, they're in 2 different committees. HB 394, that addresses safe routes to school after communities are built. This bill really just focuses on new development. So I've requested amendments. Well, actually, I just received them right before this, so I should be able to send them to you today. And I worked with MACO on that and MDOT also. And so I now have MACO with me, and they'll tell you how they feel. But the amendments should address some of the concerns addressed by the builders. And I've spoken to them, and we'll work to see if the amendment addresses their concern or what else needs to be done to work that out. My goal here is not to add more approvals. It's really to make sure the parties, all the parties, developers, the county, the school system, are thinking through and discussing this during the process. Before new housing development is approved, decision makers should have at least had a discussion of how the kids in the development will actually be able to get to the school in the new community safely. Finding a safe way to walk to school should not be an afterthought. HB 1296 plays an important role in making sure our children get to school safely. I respectfully urge a favorable report.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Don Butchko with MACO here in support with amendments on House Bill 1296. I have to thank the sponsor for working with us. We had some concerns with the legislation as drafted, particularly with authority. That being said, we've worked it out with the sponsor, and we strongly urge a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
We'll begin with Delegate Ahrens.
Quickly, did you look at State Highway MDOT's comments on the bill?
No,
I guess MACO would be the, did you guys look at what they said about who to assign responsibility to and how these routes will affect?
I believe that's amended, the piece that they're concerned about is amended out, but I have to go back and check. Yeah, I know they had concerns. I think we believe we addressed those. I'll make sure
Okay.
I'll make sure they are good with it. But I believe what they were concerned about is amended out.
Okay. Just one last thing, just for the record, I want to tell you again how much I like your other bill. Thank you.
I do appreciate that.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony. We now call on the unfavorables. Bob Enton.
Good afternoon. Robert Utton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And you do have our written testimony. We have some serious concerns about placing this obligation onto the developer. You know, our focus as a developer is on the property that we are developing, and I guess, you know, the roadways that lead into the property. But we really do believe it's more the role of the county, the State Highway Administration. We're really not in a position, I don't think, we don't think, to evaluate all the roadways that may lead to a school. I know that Lori Graff, who's the executive director of the Maryland Building Industry Association, had a conversation with the sponsor this morning. I thought they had a good conversation. We haven't seen any amendments yet, but we do believe, and if you look at our written testimony, you'll see the details, that the burden that would be placed on the developer is very heavy. It's really just not within our purview. It's not something that we look at. It's really I think, much more about the State Highway Administration, the counties, and the State Highway Administration has, if you look at the fiscal note, the State Highway Administration has a pretty robust program to look specifically at this issue. The fiscal note says that when you look at it, it says that the Maryland Department of Transportation indicates the Grants and Programs Management Division within the State Highway Administration's Office of Planning and Preliminary Engineering currently manages the federally funded Safe Routes to School program. So there is a program to deal with this. We just don't think it's appropriate for this to become part of what the developer of a piece of private property has to do. But we're happy to work on amendments with the sponsor and see if we could work something out. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Ahrens.
Sorry. I don't know if you're aware of this. When the state traffic does their highway study, when you do they give you a traffic study when you build. It's part of your package. This is not included in that. Is that what you were alluding to?
Well, I think that I don't know for sure, but my guess is it's not. Because if you look at what's included in the radius.
Okay.
I couldn't hear you,
I'm happy to get back to you and see what information we can furnish, but I don't think it is.
See no further questions. Thank you very much, Bob. See no additional questions and no additional witnesses. That concludes. Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry. Delegate Hornberger, who's joining us from ENT, is the secondary on this bill.
Thank you, yes. And this could be for the sponsor or for yourself there, Mr. Hatton. We just completed one of these, connecting our community to Perryville High School. The project took in excess of 20 years. And what we found, the lessons learned from this project, that the biggest hurdle wasn't the cost or the political will to do so, it was right-of-ways. So over and over again, we had different landowners between the engineering drawings and the right-of-ways of all the properties that had to get intersected by the sidewalk. That's what took so long and cost so much money. So my question to you, representing the builders, is that would you be more open to having lax ability or enhanced ability to do right-of-ways and zoning so that doesn't, in other words, make the project longer or unfeasible from a cost standpoint? In other words, would you be able to grant the ability to just have someone else do it? Maybe it's a transit authority, maybe it's state highway, maybe it's the county or the town. Usually it's all of the above.
Yeah.
So that they could afford to do this a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'm happy to discuss that with my client and get back to you and the committee. Okay. I guess the underlying thing is that we just don't know that this is part of what we do, and that we have a program to do this, and it's unfortunate. What you experienced in your county is a problem all over with the amount of time it takes to get approvals.
The only hook we have is new construction.
Yeah.
So if I have, here's the high school, here's existing buildings, maybe undeveloped lots, and then over here is the new construction, we can have an impact on that, but we can't have so much of an impact, in other words, connect all these properties. And that's kind of was the lesson learned on what we did.
I understand.
Yep.
I understand.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, I misspoke. Delegate Hornberger and Delegate Pasteur are here from Ways and Means, not from ENT. Seeing no further questions or witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1296. We'll now move on to House Bill 1267. Delegate Lehman, you have your panel with you. You can bring them up. Yes.
I have Gary Allen, Greenbelt Mayor Emmett Jordan, Fred Tutman, Judy Fulton, and Kirsten Hahn. I see my friend, Delegate Boyce.
And colleagues, for this bill, we have our friends from Environment and Transportation, Delegate Boyce and Delegate, is that Baker over there, joining us this afternoon.
May I start, Madam Chair? Thank you so much. So good afternoon, Chair Valderrama, Vice Chair Charkoudian, and esteemed members of the House Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Mary Lehman, seeking a favorable report on House Bill 1267, legislation to protect nearly 20,000 acres of federal land in Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties. The bill would safeguard the zoning of two large federal properties, one owned by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the other owned by the U.S. Department of the Interior. If the federal government decides to sell or lease these properties, the bill would preserve the zoning in the two counties as open space or reserve open space and would not permit commercial, industrial, or residential uses on either property. So by way of background, the Patuxent Research Refuge was founded in 1936. It encompasses almost 13,000 acres of land combined in Anne Arundel and Prince George's counties. The property is home to more than 1,250 species, including 230 in need of protection. It's the only refuge in the United States that was established specifically for wildlife research, essential work that will ensure environmental sustainability. The refuge conducted groundbreaking research on the impact of the pesticide DDT on the thickness of eggshells and hatch rates for bald eagles living in the area. Biologist, author, and conservationist Rachel Carson based her 1962 landmark book, Silent Spring, largely on the findings there. Her work was roundly criticized by chemical companies, but it led to a nationwide ban on DDT, and it also spurred creation of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The refuge also played a critical role in the recovery of whooping cranes when the majestic birds were on the brink of extinction. This is the largest parcel of land, this 13,000 acres, of undeveloped forest, meadow, and wetland habitat between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. It needs to maintain that status. It functions as what is known as a green lung between these two cities, with ecological functions that include carbon sequestration, stormwater drainage, heat island mitigation, and climate resilience. Those are irreplaceable. Patuxent also includes acreage formerly part of the U.S. Army base, Fort Meade, and that area that was added to it a few years ago was actually used as testing grounds for munitions in World War I. So that parcel is off limits to the public, and it would obviously be risky to develop it. The Henry A. Wallace Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, which the bill also seeks to protect, was established in 1910. It is a 6,500-acre property where federal scientists conduct crop research, plant and animal disease and genetic studies, food quality and safety testing, and research on the health and long-term viability of honeybees. Bark, as it's known, has been at the forefront of research that has led to hardier backyard grass, new varieties of mosquito repellent, and most famously, the butterball turkey. The property is at risk because the Trump administration last year publicly shared its goal to close it and to move its researchers to other USDA facilities across the country. In a time where the future of many federal facilities and public lands in general is unknown, it's essential that Maryland proactively protect these properties. These landscapes, again, are irreplaceable. I do have amendments after conversations with environmental and conservation organizations. I've agreed to sponsor amendments that the committee should have received, and I will follow up afterward to make sure you have. But these amendments clarify the terminology of the local zoning authority in Anne Arundel County and add restrictions on development in central natural areas of both properties, specifying that they cannot be converted for agricultural, active recreation, forestry, or other planned harvesting. If the properties are leased or sold and development is proposed, the amendments add consultation requirements with two Maryland state agencies, DNR and MDE. I respectfully ask the committee for a favorable report on House Bill 1267 to safeguard these properties for the future. Thank you, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair and committee members. Mayor Jordan, would you like to go next?
Sure. Let's see, do I need this? Hey, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Emmett Jordan. I serve as the mayor of the city of Greenbelt in Prince George's County. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1267. Greenbelt sits shoulder to shoulder with Bark and the Patuxent Research Refuge. These lands are literally a part of our Greenbelt, the open space that gives our city its name, its character, its breadth. They are the lungs of our region, buffering our neighborhoods from flooding, urban heat, and pollution, while sustaining biodiversity and tree canopy. What this bill does, it's straightforward. It requires these critically important open lands to be maintained in conservation-compatible zoning now and in the future, even if portions are sold or leased or transferred to the federal government. It still preserves the purpose of these lands. As elected officials, we know how quickly a land use change can be proposed and how hard it is to reverse. So this bill gives Maryland a backstop, a clear, durable protection, ensuring that these lands cannot be quietly converted to commercial, industrial, or residential use through a zoning overlay, special exception, or future federal land transfer. These places matter deeply to my community. Greenbelt is home to many earth scientists and researchers. I can think of one of my own residents who's been conducting longitudinal soil conservation studies at Bark for over 20 years. For Greenbelt residents and for farmers and scientists throughout the nation, it's essential that this land remain dedicated to agriculture and research. Bark and Patuxent are not abstract policy places. They're working institutions woven into the fabric of our region. So my constituents didn't send me here to watch one of our most valuable conservation land areas to become a development corridor. They sent me here to protect what makes our region livable, resilient, and worth investing in. So I urge you to, for a favorable report and to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Mr. Rahman, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Gary Allen, and I'm the former mayor of Bowie, the next community right down the road from Greenbelt. And we too want to join in support of this bill this morning because we believe its protection and preservation is essential to the quality of life in our community. These areas, should the federal government continue in its chaotic disbandment of its responsibilities for the protection of these agencies, needs to be protected, and state action to do so, as contained in this bill, we think is an essential step forward. As the mayor of Greenbelt has just stated, there's a broad section of community support for this. There's a broad cross-section of environmental support for this. And frankly, there's a good biological and environmental reasons to protect it as well. So we want to add our voice to it, and we ask for a favorable report on this legislation. Thank you very much.
Good day. My name is Fred Tutman. I've been the riverkeeper for the Patuxent for the last 22 years. And as you might know, the Patuxent is what flows through the Patuxent Research Refuge. If you glance at any map of the Patuxent River corridor, you can see there's not much contiguous open space left. The state's longest and deepest river, inside the state anyway, has a D- water quality. And frankly, the river corridor is moving towards build-out pretty fast. And by this I mean the maximum amount of paving and development it can absorb and sustain and still hope to maintain viable, healthy water supply. But a standout on that map is the 13,000-acre federally owned property of the refuge, the oldest Patuxent, or rather oldest research refuge in the country, formed in the 1930s, as has been said. The deal here is that at this juncture, the federal government's plans for the area are unclear as to the future. We watch various long-term programs being discontinued, staff retiring, people being laid off. There's a fear those lands could become surplused and reallocated for any number of non-research or non-conservation purposes, from industrial, residential, or use your imagination. And not too long ago, by the way, this same patch of ground was proposed as the maintenance yard for the now defunct maglev high-speed rail project. So to someone with aspirations towards development or industrialization or build out, this open space zone stands out, and you can see it, and it's very attractive. So as the DC area sprawls out, it's inevitable that all sorts of people and proposals might emerge for this attractive green wedge of untouched land, wetlands, and its biological integrity, its ecological treasures. At present, as the federal government kind of fades in terms of its use of the property, the idea is that this rare biological asset and this legacy property has to remain intact and has to be conserved going forward for future generations. I should point out that during the BRAC and base realignment and closure exercise a few years ago, the lands around that started getting developed pretty intensively pretty quickly. So we know that sprawl is unrelenting. So we urge you to protect this land and to give a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. What was your name again, sir?
I am Frederick Tutman, the Patuxent Riverkeeper.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chair Valderrama and Vice Chair Charkoudian and members of the committee, my name is Kirsten Hoffman, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Maryland Native Plant Coalition, urging a favorable report on HB 1267. Right in the heart of highly populated central Maryland are two incredibly unique wildlife habitats. As you've heard, the Patuxent Research Refuge and Bark, and they make up the largest contiguous expanse of open space and wildlife habitat in the Baltimore-Washington region. I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into why that contiguous space is really important for our wildlife, as well as you've heard the green lungs of the area, as well as for all of us that live in the area. This large tract provides critical, unfragmented forest areas that forest interior dwelling species, or FIDS, F-I-D-S, and that includes birds, box turtles, bats, frogs, and salamanders. They need this area to reproduce and survive. Much of the forested land in Maryland is fragmented. The whittling away of the forest tracts into increasingly smaller and more isolated patches occurs as we construct housing, commercial districts, and roads. Small fragmented forests do not provide the same environmental conditions as large uninterrupted forests, such as higher humidity and the complex layering of vegetation. And a forest fragment has a much higher proportion of edges than interior space. Forest edges facilitate the encroachment of invasive plants, allow greater light and wind penetration, and provide easy access for predators. 90% of Maryland's forested land is privately owned, and 70% of family-owned forests are less than 10 acres. Achieving the interior forest conditions necessary to support FIDS typically requires a forest of at least 50 acres. The Patuxent Research Refuge and Bark provide this necessary interior forest space, which is increasingly rare in Maryland. The benefits these natural areas provide to our state's residents and wildlife alike are priceless and should be preserved for our own and future generations. We ask for a favorable report on HB 1267.
Chair Valderrama, Vice Chair Charkoudian, and honorable members of the committee, Judy Fulton from the Maryland Native Plant Society. We strongly support House Bill 1267 with sponsor amendments. This is critical legislation that can protect and preserve one of the Baltimore-Washington region's most endangered wildlands at Bark and the Patuxent Research Refuge. Although urban sprawl and other development have substantially encroached on the region, this vast area still encompasses thousands of acres of high-quality forest, wetlands, streams, and plant communities, many of which are highly rare or unique. The natural areas on these properties have been a focus of the Maryland Native Plant Society over many decades because they are so remarkable. These are not run-of-the-mill places. I live in Baltimore, but have gone on field trips there 14 times in less than 10 years. Scientists with the Society have conducted extensive field studies. Hundreds of uncommon to highly rare plants and animals, wetlands, and natural communities have been discovered and documented for both Bark and the refuge. However, a simple count is dwarfed by the cumulative value of the irreplaceable natural landscape of both properties. One amazing habitat is the pine barrens, which is not only important in Maryland, but is globally rare. Delegate Lehman talked about many of the species that can be found on the properties. 22 plant species are state-listed rare, endangered, and threatened plants that need our protection because they are at risk for disappearing from the state. This bill provides a long overdue safeguard to prevent data centers, solar farms, industry, and real estate development from taking over these lands. Barks and the refuge's exceptional natural areas should be protected. The Maryland Native Plant Society urges a favorable report on House Bill 1267.
Thank you kindly for your testimony. We'll begin with Delegate Pippy for question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple clarifying questions for myself here. So we're talking about federally owned property at the moment that have owned it in a way that it sounds like people like, because there's a tremendous amount of, I guess, undisturbed areas of the 12,000 acres, and people like that. But there's some ongoing discussion about maybe some realignment of federal priorities, and they might be closing the facility either now or later. And it sounds like there's a lot of concern related to what happens to the property after they close it. And so here's my question. So isn't there a law already that requires that property to be continually used in open space?
So
It's in the fiscal note.
Thank you for the question. And the idea came about because, yes, going back, I'm not sure if it was in the 80s or 90s, former or current Senator Rosa Pepp, formerly a member of the House of Delegates, along with his teammates from District 21, did get legislation passed to protect the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center because there was talk at that time of surplusing Bark 6,500 acres. So that law is still on the books. The reason why we included that with in this bill to protect the Patuxent Research Refuge is because in the years since the law passed to protect bark, the Prince George's County Council, which I'm a former member of, went through an extensive rewrite of its zoning code, and the relevant zone that is named now in state law is no longer exists. So at the same time we were addressing an effort to protect the zoning of the Patuxent Research Center, which is almost twice as big as Bark, we figured it was a good time to amend the existing law to get the zoning, the correct zoning classification for that 6,500 acres of Beltsville Agricultural Research Center land.
So I just want to point out that, in your testimony, respectfully, I heard a lot of criticism of the federal government, which has been maintaining this property exactly how you want it. But I heard zero communication about the local government that has changed some rules that are probably not the way you want it. So it sounds like you want to put this bill in because something happened at the local level. Because I'm reading it, it says that there's a law in the books now that if the property sells, transfers, whatever, it has to go into permanent open space. And you're saying that that's not the law?
There is a state law currently that only addresses the 6,500 USDA property. Okay. There is no law on the books in Maryland to protect the Patuxent Research Refuge, which is twice as big. BARC, Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, owned by USDA, is entirely within Prince George's County. It's in District 21. The Patuxent Research Center, and I only learned this in taking on this bill, I knew it was both in Anne Arundel and Prince George's. I thought more of it was in Prince George's, which had been the case until Congressman Hoyer a few years ago when Fort Meade was surplusing about 5,000 acres of land, thought it made sense to add those 5,000 acres of Fort Meade property to the existing Patuxent Research Refuge. So that parcel now in its entirety, together in both Anne Arundel and Prince George's, is 13,000 acres. And as we sit here before you today, has no protection. So we are doing this in a proactive way because of our concern about the Trump administration very publicly last year announcing that it was going to seek to, either surplus or sell off the 6,500 acre Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. There was a lot of pushback from both our U.S. senators and a whole lot of other elected officials. And since then, I think it's fair to say there's been some, they've kind of gone quiet. They've retreated a little bit, but we don't know the long-term plans. And because of that, we got to thinking, wow, what if the Patuxent Research Center is next in their sights?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for speaking about the importance of protecting the Beltsville Agriculture Center and the Patuxent Research Refuge. So if we pass this bill, then if the federal government were transferred to sell portion of this land in the future, this bill will help prevent it from being converted to residential commercial development. Is that correct?
Right. The idea is to create that level of protection so that Anne Arundel or Prince George's counties could not, move to quickly rezone it for development. And I do want to say that I work with both counties, and there is, even though they're not represented here, work most closely with the Anne Arundel County Executive's Office because I've never lived in Anne Arundel, even though I represent a little bit of it. I was not as familiar with how Anne Arundel does land use or what the relevant zoning authority was. Got a little help from some of my colleagues, but work closely with the county exec shop to better understand that. Because of my prior experience on the Prince George's County Council, I had a better sense of how Prince George's does land use, and then got, there is a supportive position from the Prince George's County Council, got additional insights and ideas for amendments from the Prince George's County Council. But both counties are well aware of this and supportive.
Yeah, these days it's hard to find such a center. How these centers are being used by our local students, like K through 12, university student, can anybody explain that?
Yeah, I think both properties entertain a lot of visitors, but especially Patuxent. I think it's fair to say Bark is more research-oriented, more internal. I think it's only officially open, and I grew up in Greenbelt, you know, right beside the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. But I think officially, really, there's only a couple of buildings that are open to the public during very limited hours. It's roadways. Most of them are public and get a lot of local traffic. Patuxent is more of a destination for students and birders and hikers and the like.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for allowing the Environment and Transportation Committee to be here. Thank you, Delegate Lehman. Always a very interesting and thorough legislation. I just want to be clear. I wanted to, Delegate Pippi actually took some of my questions because I was trying to understand. So when this bill passes, if this bill passes, when it passes, the federal government would still have to maintain the property, or would that now belong to Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County?
Yeah, as long as they do not surplus it or sell it, we really don't have a say about what they're doing on it. As I said, when there was this public announcement by the Trump administration that they wanted to close down the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center and move those scientists to locations across the country, there was a lot of pushback politically and from residents. So it's kind of gone quiet since then. But for now, I'm not sure if anyone on this panel knows, you know, how many of those researchers remain there, but it still belongs to USDA. And then so far, nothing has changed except actually the executive director of the Patuxent Research Refuge left, I believe, or took early retirement shortly after the Trump administration took over. And now there's an acting executive director there, but otherwise their activity, their research, and their visitor center have continued to operate in the same way. So this just is saying, if, you know, in the future, this administration or a future administration decides to either sell or lease these properties, there would be these zoning protections in place.
Zoning and protections in place. So we pass this, they still maintain the property. They decide that they're going to do something, Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County, then
Right. No, it would not, you know, become, you know, Prince George's County or Anne Arundel counties. They would not take, you know, possession of it automatically, certainly. I guess if they look to, you know, sell or lease it, there could be some effort to, you know, to take it over either by the state or the county. But that's a lot of land.
Delegate Lehman, the question I'm asking, if that ends up happening, am I hearing you say that Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County would be willing to manage these lands? If that happened?
I doubt they have the capacity to do that. It's conceivable, potentially, and I've heard some talk about this, only because Bark has been threatened directly with closure 2 times now historically, the first time back, and I believe it was the 80s, and then again last year. That conceivably, because it is smaller, maybe, and that's a big maybe, that the state could potentially take it over and just, you know, continue to have it be open space. I think the future of Patuxent, because it is twice as large and has some of those challenges I mentioned with that former Fort Meade property that has, you know, munitions, that would be much more challenging. So again, this is a protection if or when these properties are sold or leased. And I don't know if any of my panelists would like to chime in with a different perspective.
So our organization was instrumental a few years ago in getting several $1 million to restore these weirs and locks within the refuge that allow us to draft water out of the Patuxent during flood stage. So the recovery area provided by the refuge really also protects downstream folks from overwhelming flooding, right? Yeah. If we lose that because the land becomes privatized and goes into development, and mind you, this is a relatively small river in the scheme of things, 110 miles with 36 wastewater treatment plants, a D- water score, with enormous state investment for the last 50 years in trying to protect it. And so the potential for having high intense use on these properties is enormous for really destroying the work the state has funded for
I certainly understand that. What I'm asking is about ownership and potentially transfer should something happen, whether or not the counties would be able to maintain the property in the way that, to your point, continues to protected.
Sure, I would just point out that whoever owns the property, it limits the intensity of the uses that could
Understand.
potentially go there.
I appreciate that.
Fred makes a great point. My name is, again, Gary Allen, and I think you'll find, based upon my work at the local level in City of Bowie, that should these properties be surplused, the right of first refusal goes to the state of Maryland.
That's true.
And that means the state has the right to either acquire them by gift from the federal government,
Sure.
if that's the decision of the federal government, or the right to buy them from the federal government, if that's the decision of the administration then in power. Then if the state does not decide that it wants to exercise that right, then the next local entity, which in this case would be the counties, would then acquire that opportunity to either buy it or be gifted it as space, okay? So in this case, the federal government would not have any responsibility for the further management of that property. It would devolve onto the new owner of the property, in that case, either the state or local government. But in the case of either one, the option to then rezone the property for economic development then becomes an option for that entity. And that this bill then addresses that option, which we think is a pressing one in light of previous experience with the Bay relocation bills and other kinds of things. So I think it's a real temptation to immediately surrender it to economic development forces within the state.
So then, again, should it happen, they'd be ready to take it on. I appreciate it. I've taken up enough time.
Thank you. Great question, Delegate Boyce. Thank you.
Delegate Rogers and then Bandari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the bill sponsor for bringing the bill. I mean, the property is really an ecological and educational gem. It's right down the street from my house. I mean, ownership issues aside, I mean, it's something that we definitely need to protect, and I just want to thank you for bringing the legislation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate Rogers.
Thank you. But to the delegate's point, my understanding is even though if we pass this bill, the federal government would still maintain and manage the property, not the local government, because the bill only affects the zoning rules, right? The zoning authorities like county, district council must keep the land zoned for open space or conservation, and this federal ownership remains the same now. This research refuge is owned and managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, my understanding, and the Bettsville Agriculture Research is owned and managed by U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Delegate Lehman and your panel. We have another favorable witness, Michael Wilpers.
Pleasure to see you, buddy. Long time. Sure enough.
Michael Wilpers here. Okay. We do have virtual favorable, Laura Connolly. We have no virtual. Oh, okay, no Laura Connolly. We have one more virtual, Richard Dolish.
Hi, Madam Chair. Hi, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Can you speak louder, Mr. Dolish?
Great. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm the chairman of the Friends of Patuxent, an all-volunteer group that supported the mission of the Patuxent Research Refuge for 32 years. And I'd like to give you 3 reasons why this bill is important to pass for Maryland. It's important because the land use decisions that could be made on these properties are incompatible or could be incompatible with the existing character, quality, and integrity of the communities that surround those 2 federal facilities. After more than a century of stability about management of these properties, they're suddenly under threat and at risk. And you've heard both about Bark and the potential for Patuxent Research Refuge, which happens to be a national wildlife refuge. a one-of-a-kind facility, unique in the nation, dedicated to wildlife research. The second reason is that this legislation is needed to ensure long-term preservation of these important conservation lands. You've heard about them being the green lungs of Washington and Baltimore. Senator Paul Sarbanes coined that term. More importantly, though, the potential for these lands could be used for rubble fills, for landfills, data centers, gravel pits, you name it. The federal government could do this. And incidentally, this bill isn't a fail-safe, even if the zoning classifications are changed. The federal government could choose to lease this land and therefore retain rights on the land use decisions. The third reason, though, it's important to pass this bill is that the legislation is needed to ensure that the affected counties in the state of Maryland guide critical land use decisions for Maryland lands and waters. I can't emphasize this point strongly enough. Maryland has a vital stake in what happens to these lands in the future. What we allow to happen with our land must be based on thoughtful planning and well-planned decisions. The economic consequences to Maryland are profound. With this bill, Maryland intends to keep these lands as they have been for a century or more.
Mr. Dolish,
Given the
can you
benefits of
wrap
clean
up?
air, clean water, and abundant wildlife. So we thank you for your support of the bill and urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Dolish, for your testimony this afternoon. I do not see any questions for you, so thank you kindly for joining us. Seeing that there are no further questions and no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on 1267. We'll now move on to House Bill 1252. Is there someone here to, okay, Delegate Spiegel representing Montgomery County.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Good to see you all. Hopefully this should be a very quick one on a Friday afternoon. I hope I didn't just jinx myself. Delegate Ryan Spiegel on behalf of the Montgomery County delegation for HB 1252, which is a local bill, very simple bill that was supported unanimously by our Montgomery County House delegation that requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to issue a report on housing supply and housing affordability in Montgomery County, and then provide recommendations to the county government on how to address those challenges. That's it, that's all it does. And there are a couple of amendments that were also passed unanimously by the delegation. I want to make sure you all have those, but happy to take any questions if there are any, and thank you.
Seeing no questions, Delegate Spiegel, you are lucky. No, I was hoping everyone would push their button, but having said that, thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1252. House Bill 1301, Delegate McComas, I do not see her, so we'll move on to House Bill 1299, Delegate Taylor. Mr. Jackson with you?
He is not. He had
Okay.
an emergency and could not make it, so thank you. Are you going to join me? Thank you. I haven't mastered the art of speaking off the cuff, so I will be reading my testimony. Good afternoon, Chair Valderrama and members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Kim Taylor, representing Prince George's County's District 23. As recommended by the Task Force on Property Appraisal and Valuation Equity, House Bill 1299 seeks to create a reconsideration of value process for the state of Maryland. House Bill 1299 is one bill of four that makes up a suite of Black Caucus priority bills that address appraisal bias. Last year, this bill passed out of the House, but had some issues in the Senate. Throughout the interim, we have worked to address various challenges, and I appreciate the engagement and input from the Appraisal Institute, the Maryland Mortgage Association, the Maryland Realtors, and the Bankers Association. Appraisals play a critical role in the home buying and lending process, yet numerous studies have demonstrated that properties in Black and brown communities are frequently undervalued compared to similar homes in predominantly white neighborhoods. These disparities can have real consequences for families, affecting home sales, refinancing opportunities, and long-term wealth accumulation. House Bill 1299 builds on last year's work by creating a clear and structured reconsideration of value process that allows parties to provide additional market data and comps when an appraisal appears inconsistent with market conditions. In summary, for sales transactions, if an appraiser comes in below the contract price, House Bill 1299 allows the seller or seller's agent to submit additional market data or comparable sales when requested by the lender or the lender's appraiser. For a refinance or home equity line of credit transaction, the homeowner or their representative may provide additional market data or comparable sales if the appraisal value falls below the expected valuation. This process does not override the independence of the appraiser. Rather, it ensures that relevant market information can be considered, creating a more transparent and accurate valuation process. As I mentioned earlier, House Bill 1299 is a Maryland Legislative Black Caucus priority. It reflects our continued commitment to addressing longstanding inequities in property valuation. So your support for this bill moves us a step closer to ensuring that all Maryland homeowners receive fair, accurate, and transparent property valuations. I respectfully ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1299. Thank you.
Are you here for questions, or are you, I know.
Testify, yes.
Okay, for questions.
Oh,
Okay.
no, I'm sorry, to testify.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Alberts. I'm the Director of Advocacy at the Center for Urban Families. We're a West Baltimore, District 40-based workforce development and family strengthening organization. I want to talk particularly today about the effects of appraisal bias on the members we serve. We serve individuals who are traditionally unemployed or underemployed, and we work to connect them to the workforce. As part of our case management system, we let these individuals work through what their goals are. One of their most common goals is to own a home. That's what they tell us almost every time. I want to own a home. So they go through our program, they get connected to the workforce, they work hard, they budget, they sacrifice, and they're finally able to own a home. Once they get to work, there's a variety of studies that show that individuals, when you account for education, experience, and a variety of other things, that Black workers are still underpaid by 15% compared to white workers. That means the clients we serve would have to work 15% more hours to afford the same house as a white worker. This is compounded once they actually try to buy the home and appraisal bias takes root. So for the members we serve, they must overcome a systemic underinvestment in their education, the negative employment effects of mass incarceration, the systemic racism that plagues the hiring process, having to work extra hours to afford the same home as their white coworkers, only to purchase an asset whose value is then eroded by even more systemic racism. The problem also compounds for neighborhoods. The more one home is undervalued, the more likely the next home is to be. And so we support HB 1299 because it creates an early warning system in a formal way in which individuals who believe the asset they've worked so hard to save up for and purchase is being undervalued and underpriced, and we would respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with Delegate Pippi, Rose, Roberts, and then Bandari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So are you familiar with the housing crisis that we had in 2006, 2007?
Mm-hmm. When Dodd-Frank was created?
Yeah, I mean, are you concerned? I mean, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, so an appraiser, the value of the home is dictated by a lot of comps, comparable homes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not a like a subjective thing. You know, the way I read this bill is that I mean, are you trying to incorporate new categories that an appraiser must consider in order to determine what the value is? Or is the appraiser merely just saying what the value is?
Yeah.
If you could help me understand
Sure,
that.
Delegate. You know, if we were in an ideal world, that scenario you painted, you presented would be great. Like, we could really rely on the subjectivity of every human being when valuing our properties. We would not be here today. But in fact, we have a suite of bills to address appraisal bias because it exists. We had a task force on property valuation and equity because appraisal bias exists. There have been numerous television reports, documentaries, newspaper articles. My personal example, where, in Prince George's County and certain neighborhoods, we never get a fair evaluation, in my opinion, because the same homes, if sat in other or located in other areas of Maryland, not too far away from where we live, would be valued way more. So we know this exists, but to your point, the appraiser is supposed to be neutral and is regulated to do so. So we were very careful in this bill, and in fact, I used the language from the mortgage bankers and brokers to say that a person may not use the communication and review process established under the subtitle to pressure, influence, or coerce an appraiser in the development, determination, or reporting of an appraiser for residential real property. So we tried very hard to make sure that we weren't creating a process that might inject some undue influence.
Thank you, Delegate. And for my final questions for the District 440 resident to your left, can you give me some examples of appraisal bias, like specific ones?
Sure, yeah. I would have to, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but there was an example in Baltimore a year or two ago where very famously and very notably, I think there were two black professors lived there, photos of their family, photos of their home. The appraisal came through and they felt it was undervalued compared to what they expect. Their real estate agent replaced every photo of their family with a white family, had it redone, and it was appraised at the rate they'd expect it to.
So I feel like I'm missing something here. So usually appraisals are done, there's comparables, right? So
Sure.
the appraisal goes like square foot of the house, size of the lot, and they use comps, which are just comparable homes, and then they have to describe those homes. I don't remember pictures of residents being a factor in an appraisal. I mean, so for example, when an appraiser doesn't just give like an amount and just throws it out there, the person has to lay out, this home is this square foot. It was built on this year. The kitchen was remodeled at this time. It has, this. It's like just the facts. Boom, 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 boom. And then there has to be a section that compares it to other homes of similar size and location. I'll be honest with you. My home in different places is valued differently, right? Like if my home was in Bethesda, it would be 3 times as much. I wish it was, but it's not. I'm in Frederick, right? So it's a little more affordable. If my home was in District 40, it would be a different price. If my home was in any other district, it'd be a different price. If my home was in a different neighborhood, it would be a different price. So I'm really still waiting for the punchline as to how an appraiser does an appraisal can inject their personal bias into the value. So give me which section of the appraisal that they can inject their personal opinion on what the house should be listed for or should be valued at.
Well, what we know is that.
I mean, is there a section that says like the race, origin,
No, not at
sexual
all.
orientation
Not at all.
of the
But
current occupants?
Here's the deal. In the United States, a few years ago, the statistic was 98% of appraisers were white men.
Well, why don't you put in a bill that just says every appraiser has to be of a certain race?
Well, if you're familiar with the suite of bills that we put together, We also have bills that will create a pipeline for more minority and Black appraisers through our community college system. This bill helps with reconsideration of value, and I'm going to go back to that. But I was here a week or two ago with a bill that speaks to your comps question. So in some areas, comps aren't available because the builder of those homes, they don't put the comps in the MLS. So I have a bill that requests that asks or mandates that builders put all new home sales in the MLS. So these two work together in that regard. Now, in Prince George's County, in Bowie, what we know that, that Levittown, at some point, Black people weren't even given the opportunity to buy in those neighborhoods. But once they were, and the other residents moved to other places, those places became perceptually more valuable than those places that were turning browner and blacker. Okay. Now, I have a neighbor whose home 2 doors down from me, she has the exact same house as the builder of her home. His home is Bethesda. You just, you named Bethesda. His home was worth $1 million more than her home. Now, what in the world can we attribute $1 million more worth of value in a home just because it's in Bethesda, other than who lives in Bethesda and who lives in Prince George's County, where I live?
So I would just say this. I would certainly be in support of legislation, and I may have been in the past, of for all professions, whether it's appraisers or others, to have more diversity, absolutely. And more opportunities for folks to get into those professions is a great thing. I was really hoping to hear where in the appraisal that a current appraiser has the opportunity to inject their bias. So that's what I'm really hoping that one of you could provide.
I wish you could provide it to me.
Well, it's not my bill. It's your bill.
It's my bill, but there is no place for them to inject that, yet it's injected every single day.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. I have some questions. In my first half of my career, I worked in the mortgage industry, so I actually was an appraiser. So here's a woman right here.
Okay.
And that was a good while ago. In fact, the data that I just looked up said it's approximately 38% of appraisers are women. And I certainly support women in any industry. So that's just one comment. But in the process of going through a transaction, I was there before all the big problems with real estate and before and then saw the crash coming and happen.
Yeah.
And so my concern with this, there's a couple of things. So number one of my questions is, what other states are doing state-specific measures outside of the federal guidelines that are already laid out?
Are there the federal guidelines laid out for reconsideration of value are the Tidewater Initiative for VA. What we did was we mimicked the VA. So there are examples right now of reconsideration of value, and we just mimic that. So there's no difference.
I'm talking about the federal guidelines through the Appraiser Association. So there is federal guidelines that have to be followed through Dodd-Frank, and then also that have been adopted on the federal level. So as far as being compliant with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mac, VA loans is one thing, FHA loans are one thing, mm-hmm. Fannie and Freddie are a very large portion.
Yeah.
Okay, so what percentage of Maryland loans are sold in the Fannie and Freddie Mac process?
Maybe you can answer that question, because I don't have the answer.
I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a very large
I would
amount.
imagine. But I don't know.
And if Maryland is not in compliance with Fannie and Freddie guidelines, it's going to prevent lending institutions from selling those loans.
You're
And
right.
selling those loans is how they make money and how we can have a more competitive market so that people are able to get good mortgage rates and be able to shop around and really get the best value for their money.
For sure.
So that's a big concern of mine, is making it unsellable.
So right now, how we have it written, we are we're in sync. And what we have written will not jeopardize Fannie Mae or FHA loans.
I think the way I read the fiscal note, that's probably not correct, but you and I can chat about that offline.
What you're maybe referring to is the omnibus housing bill that's now percolating in the Senate and probably will have a vote very soon. And potentially that bill may affect the way reconsideration of value is determined on the federal level. There may be some guidelines.
Well, it's not considered on the federal level. It's considered when you're in the loan process. So in times past and after the big crash, the practice was, first of all, if the buyer purchases the appraisal, it should not really be able to be, given to outside parties out of the transaction, number one. That's a concern of mine as well, because you don't want that undue influence. Because a lot of these practices centered around appraisals and it really ended up causing so much influence in the appraisals of these homes that people were ending up underwater because there was such pressure on making that loan, no matter what, that people ended up buying homes that were not worth, as the joke says, the paper they were written on.
Right.
So that concerns me, that we're taking out a lot of federal guidelines that rose out of that huge problem that really plunged a lot of people all over the place. It didn't matter where you lived, all over the place ended up underwater. So that's a big concern.
I remember.
And that interference, I think, is why we have all these guidelines for these national associations, and that to not deviate from them. So those are my concerns. I'll stop with that, but those are some of my main concerns with this and making them. I don't want people to have less access to buying homes if we overdo something like this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. So I was reading over some of the unfavorables to the bill. The Appraisal Institute, they have a lot of reasons. It's long. I just wanted to know if you had any, have you read them, and do you have any response
I haven't
to
read
any
the
of them?
Appraisal Institute's objections because we don't have access to them, but I know some of the objections. I'm very well aware of a lot of the objections, and part of it has to do with this, the pending omnibus bill, housing bill in the Senate, and Senator Warnock actually has an amendment that will include guidelines, or not really, it doesn't include the guidelines, but it names the agency heads that will be responsible for creating guidelines around reconsideration of value. So there's some concern that if we pass this bill and that bill eventually passes, then we might be out of sync somehow, eventually. But just like Delegate Lehman's bill earlier, in Maryland, we don't wait until the Fed acts. We protect Maryland's first. And that's what this bill is designed to do, is to create a fair process that will protect Marylanders. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for explaining this unconscious bias in limited or incorrect comparable sales and market perception bias. My understanding is, Delegate, one of the goals of this bill is to ensure that if relevant market data was not initially considered, there is an opportunity to submit it before the appraisal is finalized, helping reduce potential error or bias. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And just to clarify, the bill still protects appraiser independence and does not allow anyone to pressure or influence the appraisal final decision. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, in reference to that question. I do believe Delegate Taylor, 2 years ago, in reference to the bias, in reference to the appraisal bias, it was national, but it happened in Maryland in reference to two couples, in reference to a house that was appraised. They was in the same community, maybe a couple doors down. One was appraised higher than the other house. And I think this is one of the reasons why this bill was brought to us.
That's right.
In reference to address those issues. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
In fact,
Go ahead.
I own waterfront property in Annapolis, and whenever I get it appraised, I make sure my white real estate agent is there, and I'm not, just to make sure the value, because, done it before, I've been there, and when I'm there, we typically get a lower appraisal.
Right. And so you brought this bill because of that national embarrassment, not only that, because it was not fair in reference to the practice of the appraisal bias, in reference to this happening in this great state of Maryland, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill forward. This is a really important bill, and I've been in the same position where I've had to got my home appraised for a HELOC, and had to consider and took down some items to try and make the house look as neutral as possible, because the reality is, I'm going to make sure I share some of the articles and news clippings that my colleagues maybe have not seen in this arena, but it is really a pervasive issue across the country, here in Maryland, where you're literally seeing the drastic difference in appraisals based on after someone has taken their home and taken out any indications of race. So thank you for bringing this bill forward. The next question I have, I know you position this bill as, we're thinking about how this affects Black and brown wealth. But I think the other part of this, and I think we have to also just remember this, that when we affect any type of wealth stealing from anybody in Maryland, it affects Maryland's wealth. It affects, so can you speak to the economic impact of, if we're losing the value of homes for people, it's not just about Black and brown wealth. We're losing actual possible tax dollars. We're losing people who might not want to live here anymore because they feel like my home value isn't where it should be. Maybe I should go somewhere else. So can you speak to the economic impact? I think we're always thinking about it in a racial lens. But think about just in the economic impact for Maryland as a whole of how better appraisals will be better for Maryland, period.
That's for sure. Now, we have to separate the SStats assessments as compared to appraisals. But when we're looking at my home, for example, in our neighborhood, we had every single home appraised at the same value for different reasons, and just couldn't understand that, right? If once one of my neighbors put her sales price, she actually hired an agent just to put the sales price in to create a comp, raised everybody's value overnight. And then now we're paying more taxes, actually, but it also, it creates billions of dollars in wealth that potentially would have been lost. It saves billions of dollars in wealth that potentially would have been lost. If I can't use, I bought my house because I assumed it would appreciate in value over time. I found that during that time, a few years ago, my house actually lost value. Couldn't understand that, but one of the reasons was because there were no comps in the area. Although there had been sales, but they weren't in the MLS. So that's one. But when it's my husband and my goal, once we are at a point of retirement, that we could use the equity in our home to pay for our long-term care, which keeps us potentially in Maryland, to be able to move out of our home and buy another place or stay in Maryland because we have enough equity in our home to stay in Maryland, be with our kids, be with our grandkids. It also, when you have equity in your home, it allows you to pay for your children's college education. A lot of us can't afford that, but we bought homes in certain areas expecting appreciation so we can benefit in the same way as others in other neighborhoods. So it also affects the perception. We have beautiful custom homes in Prince George's and all, waterfront. But because of the perception that our homes don't appreciate at the same rate, I mean, not perception, but the reality that they don't appreciate at the same rate as others in other communities, folks don't move to Prince George's County. Folks that can afford $1 million, $2 million homes, they won't come because they know their homes won't appreciate. It's a bad business decision. And we want to change that. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you. And I'm sure you dug deep into research. I know this committee values data, so if you could share any of the articles that you have of explicit examples of where people here in Maryland or across the nation, just so the committee can better understand how big of an issue this is and what it looks like and how it works. Because I can tell some people are a little shocked that this actually takes place, but it does take place where people are literally having to hire people to come and pretend to be the homeowner so they can get a higher appraisal value. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
You've talked about two different types of appraisals where everybody went out and got them appraised. But when you sell your house, when you list it, your agent sits with you. If you use an agent, I'm going to assume you do. Mm-hmm. And you determine a sales value, correct? That's right. Okay. What's that value relative to the appraisal you think you're going to get? What do you set that? Let's say you have a home and you put it on for $500,000, let's say, and you market it. Mm-hmm. I come in and I want to make an offer on that house for $500,000, and somehow you're telling me that appraiser comes out and appraises that for $450,000. Is that right?
It could be $450,000, it could be $300,000.
It could be $300,000.
Yeah.
So this is an appraiser problem then, or it's your pricing problem. And then you said other people are getting these homes appraised for just getting them appraised. Where does that number come in?
Can I give you an example? So if I put my house, if I'm listing my home at $500,000, I have worked with, who I'm hoping is a very competent real estate agent who has used appraised comps in the area, recent sales, market data, to come up with a listing price, like you mentioned, $500,000.
Yep.
Yet a buyer comes, and the buyer, because the buyer's the one that orders, the buyer's lender orders the appraisal. Okay. That appraisal comes in Prince George's typically, it could be $100,000 less. It may not be just 25, or it could be a lot less. So let's say it came in $400,000. I, as the seller, get 48 hours to provide additional comps and market data to the appraiser. So, and the appraiser has the leeway to use it or not. So they'll look at it, they'll say, I've already used these comps, it's already in there, it's already baked in the equation, this is what you got. Or they say, wow, I didn't know that comp existed. Thank you for sharing that with me. and they come up with a different number. So that's all we're doing. We're giving folks 48 hours, only 2 days, to supply additional information that might help.
In my world where I sell, okay, I sell a home, and in this market, especially this market, I am asking people to waive their appraisal, because they have to go to the bank has to do that, and you actually sit back and say the appraisal doesn't really count in this, we still want to buy the home. Because there's a home shortage, and we all agree with that. And in this case, I wonder where I'm trying to assign blame here, and I don't know where to assign it, because what you're telling me is I can set my house at $500,000. If you get $500,000 for it, guess what? The next person selling is going to get $500,000 for it. Is that what you kind of mentioned that earlier, didn't you? That's if somebody sold their house for a higher number, and that raised the values and the assessments on your homes, correct?
The assessments, the tax assessments?
Yes.
I'm not understanding what you're.
When you raise the assessments, you raise taxes, but yes. So do the assessments, do they match the comps you're giving this guy?
The tax assessments, no.
No, they don't.
No. Mm-mm. Your tax assessment is normally a little lower than your market value, as indicated on your SSTAT report.
But they're also selling based on the comps. When you look at the comps, are they similar that way, is what I'm asking about your assessment values. And,
you're gonna
and the other
find
thing
a
I'm alluding to is in your neighborhood, if you sell your house for $500,000, the next person to sell their house, that will raise the comps, obviously.
It should. What it does is it gives an additional comp.
Okay. I guess I just run into a little bit of a problem because, the world's in the market, the banks are in the market of lending you money, and they'd like to lend you as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And the appraisers should be blind to what you and I look like. So that's where I'm wondering where this is coming from and where we can assess the blame on it, because, a home is only worth as much as you can get for it. Anything's only worth that amount. And I guess I don't understand how, I
don't understand it either. And I don't know why they should, absolutely should, but the data shows that they don't, always. And when they don't, Black people and brown people suffer.
Well, so do people that look like me in your neighborhood. We suffer too, though.
Not in my neighborhood.
You mean to tell me that if I owned your house, I'd get a bit higher appraisal?
Probably.
In your neighborhood, I'd get a higher appraisal?
Absolutely.
Well, that's probably, I don't understand that.
Me either.
I'd like to see that one.
Okay.
I'd like to see that, because I don't know that that's historically true. But thank you.
Yeah.
Delegate Weigel?
I'm not. You could probably Google me and see the reports on, the Washington Post and the articles online.
Okay, Delegate Weigel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know it's getting late. I don't want to prolong this, but I'm struggling with how this bill doesn't impact the independence of an appraiser. I mean, we all go back to 2008 when the values just plummeted and folks lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they're always looking for someone to blame, and they're going to go after the deep pockets or the appraisers or whatever. So how does this bill not, I heard your response to the delegate over here, but how does this bill not impact the independence of an appraiser?
All we're doing is we're giving them additional market data. That's it. If they already have the data, they already have the comps, that's what they'll say, that's what their report will reflect. If they don't, then, and it's a piece of data that they didn't have or documentation that they just didn't see.
So you don't think the appraiser would be felt influenced to come up with an appraisal that meets this contract sale price?
Why are they, if that was the case, they would be unduly influenced at the beginning because they've come in lower than the contract the listing price. So that could cause some pressure too.
But that's prior to this bill being passed.
That's today's law. That's today's circumstances.
Right. So my other question, on page 2, line 13, you kind of outline a process that if it does appraise less than a contract sale price, does that process already exist? Don't people already have the ability to challenge an appraisal or not?
After it's been submitted to the lender, and there's a complaint process through the Commission of Civil Rights, I'm excited about that new process, and it works, but it takes time. And if I'm in the middle of a transaction, I'm selling my home or buying a home, I don't want to wait 30, 60 days and extend the purchase, the purchase agreement or the closing of the home.
So you're saying.
Until we get some ruling from the Civil Rights Commission.
So the process you have delineated, you're saying it moves it prior to any information being submitted to the lending institution?
That's correct.
And currently, it's not submitted until after?
Currently, the complaint
You're saying
happens
the complaint.
after, right? And keep in mind, the VA has a process already in place for many years that mimics exactly what we have here. Now, it is from the buyer's perspective and not the seller, but the process is still the same.
So you're saying the VA already has this process in place?
The Tidewater Initiative. And that was because the VA wanted to make sure that their buyers, that veterans were able to buy a home and not have to come out of pocket for thousands and thousands of dollars for a home that was appraised here but listed here, because you got to come up with the difference. So that was the purpose of the Tidewater Initiative, to support veterans in their efforts to buy homes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Delegate Taylor.
Thank you.
We have a couple favorable with amendments. Lisa May, Evan Richards, Bob Enton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Bankers Association. And you have our written testimony, and I would really, it's not very long, but I would urge you to please look at it. We've probably spent more time on this bill this year than maybe any other bill we have. We met with the sponsor yesterday for probably an hour to talk about the issue and to walk through the bill. For the banks, I mean, has anybody in the room gone out and gotten an appraisal of their property on their own just because they wanted to know what an appraiser thought the value was? I think the answer is no. You get an appraisal when the buyer of the property is applying for a mortgage. And under federal banking laws and under state banking laws and mortgage lending laws, the appraisal is there so that in the event the loan goes into default and the property has to be sold, that hopefully the lender will get their money back or some portion of it. They typically don't. But that's why you have appraisals, and they're mandated and heavily regulated. Talking to the sponsor, and if you look on our written testimony, there are 3 points. And one is that it requires an appraiser to notify a point of contact and you share this information. There's a 2-day window. There's a separate provision that is in the bill which says that requires lenders and appraisal management companies to monitor appraisals for compliance. We don't monitor what the appraiser does for compliance. That's why we have regulators. I really, really think this is an important bill. I think that the committee needs to take time to look at it. I got 20 seconds left to talk. I'm happy to answer questions. We would love to work this bill out, but this is a very, very important bill. The one thing you do not want to do, in my opinion, is to do anything which would jeopardize the independence of the appraiser to assess what the true value is. That's in everyone's interest. But please just keep in mind that appraisal is based on comparable sales for that particular home, regardless of where it's located. The appraised value of a home in Bethesda has nothing to do with the appraised value of a home in Somerset County. It's the comparables in that community because that's what the property is going to sell for in the event it has to go to sale. So I really, really hope that you'll give us the chance to talk about this in subcommittee and to have a very vibrant discussion about what makes sense here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. Realtors have supported a reconsideration of value process, not just for the purposes of additional comps, but it can also be used to correct factual errors on the property that is being appraised. But we are, as you have heard, a step removed from the appraisal process by design, and that is to ensure that appraisals can be completed without undue influence. So our comments here today are limited just to the parts of the bill that reflect what a consumer or what a real estate agent would be able to submit as information to an appraiser. The first is on page 2, where it describes the comparable sales grid. Now, I admittedly did not have a copy of this in my back pocket. I had to go searching on the internet. And probably someone who's working with a real estate professional could, within 2 days, find this grid, find all of the information, put it in that format to submit to an appraiser. But a homeowner who's trying to get a refi, someone who's not working with a real estate professional, I think that would be a pretty heavy lift for them to track down all of this information and be able to submit it. And then second, on page 3, where it talks about using a pending sale as a comparable, it states that you need to submit all contract documentation. That is not something that anyone outside of that pending sale is going to have access to. There are maybe 4 people in the state of Maryland that have access to that: the buyer, the seller, and their agents, if they are using them. So if we were to keep that language in the bill, we think that would prevent pending sales from ever being used as comparables in a reconsideration of value process. We've spoken with the sponsor on this. We hope to resolve these issues in this bill and hope that those are amendments you will consider. Thank you.
Delegate Ahrens.
Just briefly, and you might not know this, I might be able to get the delegate afterwards. I was wondering if the appraised value, you know, as a realtor, you look at several sites when you're looking at homes, the value of homes. I was going to wonder out loud if it's the same price on, what's the price on Zillow versus homes.com, these other sites that actually come out there. They don't really appraise, they don't come out and look at everything. They just gather data. Am I right?
I would say that's correct. Some of them use algorithmic data to project some sort of estimated value. If you look in the fine print, you can see that that's off quite a bit.
But when I go on a listing agreement, I actually gather that information and say, these are the ranges, this is what the world's telling you. And maybe after this is done, Delegate, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind asking you that. But I'll catch up with you later. Thank you.
See no further questions. Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. We'll now move to the unfavorables. Scott DiBiasio.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Scott DiBiasio. I'm the Director of Government Affairs with the Appraisal Institute. The Appraisal Institute respectfully opposes House Bill 1299 as introduced because it would create a Maryland-specific reconsideration of value process that conflicts with the existing structure of the mortgage appraisal system. We share the sponsor's goal of addressing inequities in housing markets that stem from past discriminatory government policies, such as redlining and exclusionary zoning. Those harms are real and long-lasting. However, individual appraisers did not create those structural conditions, and the appraisal process cannot correct them through mechanisms that compromise independence or professional standards. House Bill 1299 raises several significant concerns. First, the bill undermines appraiser independence by requiring appraisers to notify and interact with transaction participants, such as buyers, sellers, and real estate agents, when a value may fall below a contract price. These parties have a direct financial interest in the outcome, and inserting them into the appraisal development process risks undue pressure. Second, the bill conflicts with the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, which govern appraiser independence, confidentiality, and the appraiser's relationship with the client. Third, the bill creates a reconsideration of value process that is inconsistent with federal guidance, where reconsideration requests occur after an appraisal is completed and are managed by the lender, not the appraiser. In addition, Congress is currently considering legislation that would require federal housing agencies overseeing federally insured or guaranteed mortgages to ensure lenders maintain borrower-initiated reconsideration of value process. And that legislation is widely expected to become law. Whatever requirements ultimately emerge at the federal level would likely preempt a Maryland-specific reconsideration of value process for those federally backed mortgages. For these reasons, the Appraisal Institute respectfully urges the committee to issue an unfavorable report on House Bill 1299. We would welcome the opportunity to work with the sponsor and the committee on amendments that align Maryland law with the existing guidance. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll start with Delegate Ahrens and then Delegate Rose.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. When we did an appraisal bill, nobody showed up the last time, but I appreciate you being here. Have you spoken to the sponsor of the bill?
Yes, and we've worked, this was a bill that was introduced last year, and there was some work that was done on it. Unfortunately, what's reflected in House Bill 1299 doesn't include some of the changes that were made last year. I believe it was House Bill 1151.
Well, you know, I know the lady, and I don't expect she would be lying to me, but I mean, some of these things come up. Is there a good, rational discussion you and her had about this bill and that made sense? Because just on what we've heard today, I'm looking at appraisals saying that that's where the hiccup is. You know, everything else all pans out. The appraisal seems to be the part that's sitting down saying, oh, what am I doing here? And is there a logical explanation for this stuff that we could discuss and openly?
And we would be very happy to have a reconsideration of value process that is consistent with federal guidance and potentially federal law. We would be supportive of having that codified here in Maryland. But right now, as proposed, the system would be very, very different. And we look forward to working with Delegate Taylor on putting in place a process that is consistent.
Even in my world, I sit down and I get appraisals done all the time, and I can honestly tell you, I sit back and look at what they appraise the house that I'm selling for, and I sit down and say, I can walk right down here. You're not getting my right comps. You're taking comps, but they're not relative to me. And I think she alluded to something like that. You have a couple of days to say, okay, here's what I'm doing over here. This house, give me that. And I don't understand how that all keeps playing out. It used to be back in the old days where if I got a sales price on my house of $500,000, my appraisal came in for $1,000. Right. And that's the way it was working. And I don't understand where the wires are getting crossed here, because if this is truly happening, this is wrong. But you do see, but based on the discussion we had today, that it all points to the word appraisal. And I don't know how we fix that without coming up with something from you all to sit down and make us comfortable that this is really not happening or happening, and how do we fix it?
Right. I can tell you that most lenders already, if not all lenders, already have reconsideration of value processes in place that allow someone in the transaction to provide, through the lender, additional information to the appraiser for the appraiser's consideration. That has to be done in a way that doesn't pressure the appraiser or put undue influence on the appraiser. But there is that process in place. And we would be happy to codify that process here in Maryland.
Well, we could do that, but that should be the exception, not the rule. And that's why I think I appreciate your answer, but this can't go that way. It just doesn't make sense. And I don't see this changing from when we put the bill in to actually sit down and hold appraisals to a different standard. I think we added education or whatever and a couple other things. So I just have concerns about it. I wouldn't mind being involved in that conversation just for my own sake, because it's really difficult for me to walk out there and say, well, this is going to cause you a problem. I just want you to know that up front. We talk about crawl spaces like that, but I don't want to talk about people that way. But I appreciate your comments, and I'd love to be part of it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here today. I had a couple, I guess, questions. So just to clarify what's common practice with appraisals. So similar to what Delegate Ahrens mentioned, you know, back in the day, you would request an appraisal, and yes, it would come in at miraculously somewhere in that ballpark that would make sense for the loan. But when we had all those problems, that was pretty much eliminated. But even back then, is it not true? So you've got VA, FHA, and then you've got the commercial market. So even back then, we were not allowed to choose, we had our favorite appraisers, everybody did, right? So, but even back then, you were not allowed to choose a VA appraiser. You had to go through a process, and this was, I'm really dating myself, but sometimes it would take you, days to get through, and then you had to request an appraiser, and then you would get given an appraiser. There was no direct tie to that independent person, and you had no influence over them at all. FHA is a little different. They would have people that would want to become FHA appraisers, and they would have to go through a process to be allowed to be FHA appraisers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then regular appraisers would just, it's more in the commercial market, the Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae's. Okay. So I just wanted to clear that up because go ahead if you have.
And those appraiser independence requirements as a result of the real estate crash in 2007, 2008 timeframe, those appraiser independence requirements have been strengthened to further remove any potential for the appraiser to be put under undue pressure.
Right. The days of picking your own appraisers are gone.
Absolutely.
And have been for probably, 15 years at least or more?
Well, let's see, Dodd-Frank was enacted in 2010, so probably a couple of years before that is when the effort to strengthen those appraiser independence requirements occurred. There was a big lawsuit up in New York that was brought, and there was an agreement called the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, which ultimately became the appraiser independence requirements.
Okay. My second question, it was brought up about penalties. So there's some pretty strong penalties for an appraiser to not be independent, to do an upright job, and that would include revocation of their license, and of course, legal recourse as well. But an appraiser, if you get a revocation of license or you get complained about, you're not going to make any money. You're not going to be an appraiser anymore if you, number one, get your license taken away, or if you have become a problem. Do you feel like there's enough fail-safes to govern bad behavior?
Yep, there are processes in place both at the federal level and at the state level for anyone in a transaction to file a complaint against the appraiser or anyone else in the transaction. But here in Maryland, those complaints are filed with the Commission on Appraisers, AMCs, and home inspectors. At the federal level, it would be with one of the federal bank regulatory agencies. So consumers have a lot of recourse available to them if they feel that they haven't gotten a fair appraisal.
Okay, and just my last question. I just wanted to clarify because the timing has been brought up. So it's one thing to submit to the lender, but in the process, there's the step where it is submitted to the local office that is doing the processing of the loan and packaging it together to go to an underwriter who is somewhere looking through all of this information. So there is time typically, would you not say, that to submit additional documentation to challenge an appraisal and to say, hey, you're missing this, you're missing that. There are some things that sometimes aren't on the multiple list, such as for sale by owners. It gives people time to say, well, I know for sure, and then that gives the appraiser time to investigate a for sale by owner or something that isn't on the typical, places that you do the.
There is typically a time between when the appraisal was completed and the transaction closes. And as I said to Delegate Arentz, most lenders have in place reconsideration of value processes, and many lenders provide documentation of that reconsideration of value process to the consumer at the time of loan application. So consumers are well aware that the process is available to them if they feel that they have not gotten a fair appraisal.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I mean, part of I think the job here of public policymakers is to be as objective as possible, right? When you hear bills, and so I'm gonna do my best here. Can you help me find where could an appraiser be biased? Like, so there's an appraisal report that's due, but like, where are there opportunities for any, and, you know, let's be creative here. Like, where could they be biased and, you know, leading to this issue?
Yeah, let's be honest about it. You know, there are potentially bad apples out there that will treat people that have a certain personal characteristics differently based upon their own personal beliefs. But I would say that that number is extremely small. You know, appraisers are prohibited by law from being biased. You know, the Federal Fair Housing Act applies to appraisers. And if an appraiser does something inappropriate and treats somebody differently based upon their personal characteristics, there are significant consequences.
So I understand that. So here's what, I guess here's what I'm looking for. So use an example. So there's a home for sale, right? You got to get an appraisal for it. The home next to it sold for $400,000. This home sold for $410,000. Right? It's usually, you know, those are comps.
Yes.
So right. So is that's probably not the area where the bias is, right? Because the appraiser is going to have to show that, well, this home and this address sold for this. This home sold for that. So there's probably not a lot of wiggle room to be biased there. So give me another category. So what I'm getting at is, where in the appraisal report is there enough discretion to where an appraiser, so they can't do it with square feet, right? Because the house is a certain size.
Right.
The lot's a certain size, and they have to publish that data. Like, this home is this square foot, this is the lot of this compared to others. So where in the appraisal report is there an opportunity for a very small amount of appraisers to be biased? Help me understand that piece.
In general, it relates to the comparable selection. There have been allegations that appraisers have gone outside of the market area of the property to cherry pick comps and to use those comps to generate a lower value.
So they ignore more appropriate comps.
Correct.
And picked less valued homes to reduce, okay.
Right. Okay. And keep in mind, there have been probably a dozen cases like that around the country in the last 10 years, and no appraiser, not a single appraiser, has been found to have done anything illegal or inappropriate. Okay. And in the case in Baltimore, that appraiser actually was exonerated.
What about so curb appeal is, I guess, a potential category. So for example, you're doing house size, you're doing lot size, you're doing comps that have sold in the neighborhood, right? Those are all somewhat hard data points.
Correct.
That I think objective people can compare. But curb appeal is, I think, subjective to some extent, potentially. So what percent can an appraiser assign curb appeal to an appraisal? Like, I'll give you an example. Can an appraiser go in and be like, well, the style of the furniture selection and the paint selection of the interior's home is, you know, let's say, of a group of people that person has a bias against. Could they assign 10% of the value to that curb appeal? Or is there parameters on that?
Generally, cosmetics, okay. Which paint and interior would be, factor very little into the appraised value of a property.
Is there a rule that it says that percent has to be below? Like, no. Do they say like comps have to be 50%, square foot, lot size has to be 50% and then, or 40%, and then you have essentially 5 to 10% for curb appeal to use at your discretion? Yeah. Is that how that works?
So the appraisal is based, as you correctly stated, on comparable properties, and then the appraiser makes certain adjustments based upon differences between the property. Okay. And there is a quality and condition rating that an appraiser has to assign to a property. And if they, I forget exactly what the scale is, but if a property has, holes in the roof and leaks and things like that, that's the type of stuff that the appraiser would adjust the value based upon.
Yeah, but to replace a roof has a cost, right? So the appraiser is going to say, well, this is a square foot, this is the roof, this is the average cost, and so that's a hard data point. What I'm trying to get to is the subjective part.
There's very little subjectivity in an appraisal. It's all data-based.
Okay. And to become an appraiser, is there like a training or guidelines onto what that subjectivity could be? Like, because what I'm trying to find, and to my colleague's point, is there an opportunity for someone to be biased outside of hard data points, like outside of square foot, outside of lot size, outside of comps, outside of it needs a new roof, outside it needs new appliances? Where is the style part that the appraiser can be like, you know what, like this does not have the curb appeal that would be good, I'm gonna knock off $100,000.
Right. There's very little opportunity for that subjectivity. And, if an appraiser was intending on treating somebody differently based upon their personal characteristics, there are ways that they could lower the value, just as, we saw during the 2000s, appraisers were artificially inflating values. But there is, very little opportunity for the appraiser to, to subjectively just lower a value based upon, like you said, curb appeal.
Okay, all right, thank you for those questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, sir, for spending your weekend with us here. The question I have for you is, have you heard of any studies or any investigations of bias, of appraisal bias?
Yes, there have been several well-known studies. Most of them have used incorrect data. They've used assessment data rather than appraised value data. And we had many of those studies reviewed, and there were some questions as to the methodologies that were used. Let's be honest about it. Two different properties in two very different neighborhoods are going to have very different value.
The question I think I'm getting to is that in reference to this, right? Because, you can have two different things, but are you saying that the Department of Housing and Urban Development is factually untrue?
I think a lot of those studies and a lot of those allegations were politically motivated.
Federal Housing and Finance Agency is factually untrue?
I'd have to take another look at, the study and the data that they utilized. But there were some methodological questions as to the results that they came up with.
Okay, and what about the Brookings Institute?
So
the Brookings Institute, I'm looking, I just did a cursory search, and I'm looking, the Brookings Institute found that housing in majority Black neighborhoods were valued at 23% lower in average than non-Black neighborhoods. Right. So they're factually untrue?
I could say that, the value of real estate is location, location, location. And two exact properties that are exactly the same in two very different neighborhoods are going to be valued differently. And that's the methodology that study utilized.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not coming after you. I'm just asking questions because I've seen the studies and I've seen the reports on television where, Black homeowners have to pull all their items and everything out of their homes and off their walls just to sell their house at the same rate as non-Black residents.
And we've had those appraisals reviewed, and there are very legitimate reasons for the differences in value.
One more question, Madam Chair. So what were some of those reasons?
Location. Quality of schools, access to public transportation, infrastructure, all those things can affect value.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
I'm gonna pull a card from some of my colleagues who like to Google things during committee hearings, but I'm gonna use a vivid example. I'm gonna try and get to what Delegate Pippy was trying to figure out here, because the issue that we're trying to solve here is there's this subjectivity component of an appraisal where we're seeing this gap between white homeowners and non-white homeowners. So I'm looking at an article. I think this happened within the past 6 years. So after all these acts have passed to make sure things are fair, a Black couple, their home was appraised for $995,000. They said this has to be wrong. This is in California. They then went and got it appraised again, and they whitewashed the home. So they took the home, they got rid of all the effects that showed that they were Black. They had someone white come in and show the home. It went from a $995,000 appraisal to $1,482,500 appraisal. So we're talking about literally a $600,000 difference in price. In the appraisal process, where can you find $600,000 of difference in what we call curb appeal or styling of the home, right? So the issue I'm trying to understand here is we have all these layers of how you appraise a home. And I would agree with you that there's different, neighborhoods have different amenities. So I understand if one neighborhood has walkable grocery stores, walkable transit is gonna be different than a neighborhood that doesn't have that. I get that. But we're talking about the exact same house, two appraisers came in, they took the effects of them being black out of the house, it appraised $600,000 more. Where is an appraiser finding this? How does that happen?
There's 2 points that I can make in relation to that. First of all, the appraisal in question had a lot of errors in it, none of which were related to the personal characteristics of the property owner. That was simply an incompetent appraiser. And the reason for, and also keep in mind that when the second appraiser goes into the home, generally they know why they're there, because the first appraisal was low. So there could be some bias towards that, and knowing that you're there because there was a lower appraisal, and there could be, an attempt to try to push value. But if that is occurring, it's illegal and should be the appraiser.
Yeah, and they sued and they got a lawsuit in federal government. But I'm trying to understand just, I guess I'm just trying to, I'm not an appraiser. I've had my home appraised, and I was happy with my final appraisal. I had it appraised twice. But ultimately, I'm trying to understand, where is there room for that? Like, where in the appraisal process, like the other people said, you get square footage, you have comps, you have a minute. So are we talking about this person looked at the granite in the bathroom and said, this granite, the grade of this granite is lower than the granite that I prefer, so I'm gonna knock this down. The cabinets in this kitchen are from 2017, not 2018. That's another 10,000. Like, where is the subjectivity for that to happen? I'm trying to understand that.
In the adjustment process, there are things that an appraiser could do to artificially inflate or deflate a value by saying, and let's be honest about it, public records information is very, very inconsistent on things like square footage. And if you take two appraisers to a property and they measure the property, you're probably going to come up with 3 different answers because there's just too much room, or there is room for error. And again, an appraiser, if they wanted to treat somebody differently, there are things that they could do in the appraisal, but there are very legitimate reasons why 2 appraisals of the same property may be different. The appraiser, the methodology. I'll use the example of a tax appeal. Let's say, looking at a commercial property. In a tax appeal, you have the assessor's appraisal, you have the property owner's appraisal. They're generally very different, and the true answer is usually someplace in the middle. Yeah, an appraiser could improperly adjust for things like not liking the cabinets or not liking the color of the paint. But generally, I can tell you that is very rare.
Got it. So, but it sounds like errors happen, and we should be doing something to make sure that we have laws that ensure that things are as error-free as possible and that we have a better streamlined method. But I appreciate your answers and your time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hopefully this will be quick. So I just want to understand, for the appraisal process, it is only through comps, you don't come into the home? Is that?
Generally, although it's not always required, generally the appraiser will do a physical inspection of the interior and the exterior of the property.
So I heard you mention with Delegate Pippi that, there's no place for someone to have subjective information. So I get the comps, and then somebody comes to my home. Where are those notes put? Where is that in the form? Because to me, when you come into my home, that becomes now subjective, right? Because you see one thing, and I might see something. So where is that put into the form?
There are places on the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report for the appraiser to make comments about the quality and condition. And yeah, in some cases, those are.
And so those would be subjective.
Correct.
We would have correct. So there is place in the document that collects subjective information.
Right, and if the.
So you're going to correct that statement you made to Delegate Pippy that there's no place for subjective information?
But generally, cosmetic issues don't affect value significantly.
I don't know what you see when you come in cosmetically. That's the point. I don't know once you come in and introduce a person that's different from data, that is not subjective.
I just said that there is
Okay,
some
thank you. I
subjectivity.
just want to make sure that was corrected. There is room for subjective information on the form.
What one appraiser may.
On the form. Yes
There
or
is a
no?
place for.
Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. DiBiasio. We do have an unfavorable virtually, Mark Schiffman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mark Schiffman. I represent the Real Estate Valuation Advocacy Association. Our members are appraisal management companies. And so I just want to touch on a couple of things. We are in support of Delegate Taylor's mission. Our concern is with the process that's being proposed in that we were a part of the program, the PAVE initiative, when it was initially created at a federal level. From there, they created the reconsideration of value rules that went to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and since then, the FHA ones have been removed. But those ROV policies do remain in Fannie and Freddie and are used by lenders, a requirement for lenders, AMCs, appraisers. And that is a process that at the end of the appraisal, not during the assignment, which gets us into the whole concern over appraisal independence, which is not only a federal law, but also we would be in violation as AMCs of state law as well. Our hope would be to work with the Delegate Taylor and the rest of the group and come up with something that is consistent with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The use of the VA Tidewater initiative is not a good example here. It's this closed appraisal process. It doesn't involve AMCs, and it is a completely different animal, which is why when PAVE was created at the federal level, it wasn't considered because it was in the middle of the process. And that upsets Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's independence requirements. In that case, any appraisal would not be able to be eligible for sale to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac per them. That's not my statement. So we believe that, number one, we're happy about the federal law, and that's going to push forward more broad ROV, and so we're hopeful. But we think that anything that's done in Maryland should mirror what's already at the federal level and get us to where we want to be on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schiffman. There are no questions for you. Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Seeing no further questions, no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1299. Delegate McComas? What is happening?
I believe I was registered under the Dennis Rasmussen Group.
Nope.
For the Maryland Mortgage Bankers and Brokers.
Bob Eden spoke for Maryland Bankers Association.
Right. This is the mortgage bankers.
Right, not signed up.
Not signed up.
Not signed up. Yeah, we have written testimony.
Okay, I had been advised we had written and oral.
Okay. We now move on to House Bill 1301. Delegate McComas? She was here. Oh my God, we're going to skip her again? Oh my God. Okay. Oh, there she is. You almost skipped over you again, McComas.
I'm sorry. I should have been a little here, just I had to. Never mind. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair and committee. This bill has been before the legislature last year, and it passed unanimously in the House. It got into the what do I want to say? The Rules Committee of the Senate, and so it got a hearing, but it did not get a vote, and that was on April 7th. So this is HB 1301, Land Use, Historic Preservation Commission, right to appeal cross-filed with SB 967. HB 1301 is presented to clarify and codify the appeal rights of those who own land in areas deemed to have historic significance. Under Title 8 of the Land Use Article, Historic Preservation, local authorities have certain powers to preserve sites and/or structures by following procedures set forth by the local zoning authority. Before a landowner may make changes that would affect the historic significance of any such site or structure, the owner must apply to the local Historic Preservation Commission for approval before the project may move forward. Under Title IV zoning of the Land Use Article, and upon application by the landowner, the local Board of Appeals may hear and decide whether any decision by the commission is errant in its determination. A 1982 Attorney General opinion advised the town of Easton that 4-305 gave the local Board of Appeals the power to hear and decide appeals from decisions of the local historic district commissions. The opinion went on to state that 4-406 allowed the locality to provide an alternative right of appeal of such decisions directly to the circuit court. Although an appeal to the circuit court is expensive and time-consuming for all concerned. So the genesis of this bill was that the local Town of Bel Air Historic Commission wished that they could handle the appeal, or the Town Appeals Board, before ever having to go to court, because you have to have transcripts, you have to hire an attorney, you have court fees. Anyway, it's very, very expensive to do that. So they wanted, basically, Bel Air's trying to be a inexpensive local town that preserves its historic tradition. And so they don't want to have to see if there is need for appeals to have to go to the court immediately. However, the revisor opinion that the consideration by the General Assembly was needed because of the appeal rights, and the process for an appeal for those aggrieved remained somewhat unclear. So that is exactly why HB 1301 proposes to do, is to clarify and codify those rights, that they can go to the appeal process through the town as opposed to through the court. And, if they don't like the town's decision on the appeal, they can always go to court to spend a lot of money. So anyway, HB 1301 was presented and heard as HB 1255 last year. It passed through the House with a unanimous vote. Unfortunately, its hearing in the Senate was set for April 7th, 2025, obviously too late to complete the legislative process for sine die. All amendments made last year, which resulted in the passing, are included in HB 1301 this year. So I please request a favorable report for 1301.
Thank you, Delegate McComas. I don't have any questions for you. Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. We do have someone testifying in favor. Darlene McLaughlin.
Darlene is my aide, and I was hoping to get the mayor of Bel Air, Ms. Edding, but she was unavailable. So, and last year she sat in probably half the day at a minimum waiting for the bill hearing. So it's just, and she's also running for county council now. So it was just, yeah. And it's a small bill, but it's going to be very good for smaller communities. And quite honestly, I was speaking to some of the folks from, I believe, the Baltimore City Historic Commission, and they liked the idea too. So it's a statewide bill. Originally, we thought it would just be a local bill, but they said that it's really a statewide for the communities that have.
Well, if I heard you correctly, this moved out last year, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And we did forward the voting list and everything for you, that it was unanimous and that it did go to the House, but went to the Senate, but nothing happened. So,
got it.
But the vote was 132 yes, no nays, 3 not voting, and 6 absent.
Great.
But it did pass, and we have a cross file with Senator Gallion in the Senate. Unfortunately, it's in rules, but we think if it gets out of rules on his side, he's good to go. And I think it's going to go to finance. I believe it's either going to go to finance or the 3 E's. And he's on the 3 E's. He's our only farmer in the
Great,
state.
yeah. So, right, we moved this out last year. This should be, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Seeing there's no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1301. And last but not least, our very favorite delegate. I was trying to think. Delegate Weigel with House Bill 1362.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I shouldn't be more than an hour.
Don't jinx it.
No, it'll be much shorter than that. Did Bob Benton leave the room? Okay. Delegate Weigel, pleased to present House Bill 1362. This legislation simply requires that meetings of the Council of Unit Owners, Board of Directors, or governing body of a condo and of a homeowners association be recorded by video with audio or audio only, and requires that these recordings be kept in a certain manner. There are several key reasons to require meetings to be recorded. Recordings create a clear, accurate record of what occurred, preventing disputes over what was said or decided. Written minutes can be vague, contain omissions or unintentional errors. Recordings provide a definitive source to verify motions, votes, and discussions, making it easier for secretaries to produce detailed, accurate minutes. Not all homeowners can attend meetings due to work schedules, disability, family obligations, or distance. Many HOAs, condos now hold virtual or hybrid meetings. Video conferencing tools, as we well know, already include built-in recording notifications and controls. When disagreements arise, recordings can provide clear, objective evidence. Members can watch recordings. Who watch recordings are more likely to stay informed and participate in community affairs, increasing the legitimacy of board decisions. And HOAs are run by volunteer boards that turn over regularly, and the recordings can help board members understand the rationale behind these decisions and help maintain historical continuity. And we all know that smartphones and laptops make audio and video recording nearly effortless. And local government, school boards, state agencies routinely record meetings, and homeowners increasingly expect transparency comparable to the public sector standards. I did speak with Mr. Enton earlier. He did say he was opposed, but his opposition was more like a softball versus a hardball. So I think we can work out those differences. And you know, if there's an issue with the records retention and all that, I'm willing to let those go as well, as long as they're distributed to the members. So thank you for your attentiveness on a Friday afternoon. I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. We'll start with Delegate Ahrens.
I just got to ask you, and I like the bill. My biggest issue would be the bill. I think it's mentioned in one of the unfavorables. When you're dealing with personal situations, like people being in arrears and personal issues on a board, that I don't believe should be made available to the whole community. How are you going to handle that in this bill?
Well, if they handle those as closed session items,
closed session is
the
that?
bill specifically says closed session item. Closed sessions are not required to be recorded.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Delegate Roberts.
You just had to ask a question.
I did. I have two. One, do you know how to use the recording function on your phone?
I do, yes.
You do? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, my real question is, you know, in order for, say, we use an application like Zoom, and then, you know, you have to store them and stuff, and then I don't know if the Zoom, I know that I get a notification from my Zoom that my recordings are about to, you know, be deleted. Is there anything that talks about, how, like, is there a time limit on how long they have to be stored for?
The bill doesn't specifically go into that, but that was one of the points of opposition, and I'm willing to have the recording requirement in place and waive any record retention requirements. So when the meetings are sent out to the members, the recording could simply be sent along with that, and we're done with it. I think recording the meeting adds a bit of professionalism to the.
Oh, I like it, yes. Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Delegate Weigel. Yes. We do have Thomas Allen.
Jumping right in, when asked what kind of government do we have, legend is Ben Franklin said, "A republic if you can keep it." There's case law that says a county can't hire a private police force as a means to avoid Miranda rights. But apparently, when public government requires creation of private government, that's a means to avoid open government. Opponents will argue no corporate board is required to record meetings, but no other corporate board is a quasi-government that isn't subject to the Open Meetings Act. Look at the Act's definition of quasi-judicial function. Look at its definition of quasi-legislative function. Yet it's a felony to record your council meeting. This bill doesn't go far enough, notwithstanding 10-402 of Courts and Judicial Procedures. It should legalize any unit owner or lot owner to record the meeting because a board may not comply with this law. A board won't want to create evidence. So this bill will only help us catch the dumb criminals, but it's a start. It's much more cost-effective to send videos to the OAG since it can't afford to investigate acts that no one can prove existed without a recording. HB 1362 is an important first step. We encourage democracy around the world, but our own government creates the opposite every time a shovel hits the ground. There's a funny man in the news that said people live in homes, not corporations. You know they live in corporations. You know they have no Bill of Rights. The abuse by this private government industry is endemic and it is systemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. See no questions for you. Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. We will now move on to the unfavorables. Angela Vasquez and Bob Enton.
Okay. Well, let's hope the traffic's not too bad tonight. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. With all due respect to my good friend, the sponsor, who I think is a wonderful person. Is that soft enough? That's my softball for the day. We are opposed to the bill. And I think the issue is that putting aside the expense of doing this, which will be on the condo or homeowners, I think it's also a matter of having a chilling effect. These are not government. This is not government. This is an association. It's voluntary. You don't have to mandate that they serve. But they're people that live in the community, that are serving their communities. And I think it will have a chilling effect on people if you know that, whatever you say is going to go out. If you got 100 residents or 200 residents, and everyone's going to get a recording of anything that you're going to say at a board of directors meeting. And even if you're the board of directors and you're going to have a discussion back and forth, or you're going to have as frank a discussion about something that's a problem as if no one was there. I understand that it's a well-intentioned bill. I understand that, the argument for it, frankly. But I'm just, we're concerned about what I think is pretty unprecedented, to have this group have to record their meetings and then send them out to every single member of the entire association. So those are the concerns. If we're happy to work out some language, the sponsor maybe, suggested some possible changes he would be willing to make, and that would be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name's Angela Vasquez. I'm a member of the Maryland Legislative Action Committee with CAI, and we oppose House Bill 1362. Maryland's an all-party consent state for recording, and when you're recording at a homeowner's meeting, they may not have consent from both parties, and that is putting the association at liability. And some volunteers would not be interested in being recorded, so they may not join and help their community. Another factor to consider is that public board of directors with corporations are not required to record their meetings either. Periodically, meetings can have outbursts from homeowners with sensitive information. That information now becomes the association record and is held for the statute of the association because it is the association's record. There is already laws in place that state that records are held by the association. Depending upon the size and the complexity or the financial standing, some associations are managed professionally. When they're turned over from other management companies, that information could be lost during the transition, and the association is then held liable for that information that could have been lost during transferring from management companies. Some associations are self-managed. They don't have the financial means to hire a management company, and they have to carry the financial burden of that, storing those records. Artificial intelligence manipulation is a new technology. The information could be manipulated. There's no regulatory guidelines for that. Types of crimes that could occur from these records being stored, and then the bill does not consider if there's technological differences or issues. So we request unfavorable on that.
Delegate Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bob, can't they just go into, or can't they adopt rules to just go into some type of executive session?
Yeah, they do have the ability to go into executive session, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Bhandari.
Yeah, a quick question. The bill simply improves transparency and accountability in condominium homeowner association, meeting by requiring them to be recorded and accessible to members. What's problem is with the bill? Can you comment on that?
Me?
Yeah, anybody.
Well, I gave you several factors in the testimony, basically storing financial burden. It's going to increase their insurance coverage for liability. Some associations are struggling financially. They don't even have management companies. Who's then going to store this information? How's the information going to be transferred when a board member resigns? Who's going to have that information? A lot of these board members are volunteers, so how are you going to get it around, and who's going to maintain it?
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Young lady from CI, don't you have all those issues now? Who maintains the records, who maintains the minutes, how they're relayed once there's turnover? I mean, don't you have all those existing conditions?
You do,
now?
but you're also adding an additional burden to that by requiring storage of meetings, by requiring, cyber insurance for protection for the association. That's an added fee. Who's going to pay for these services? Some associations don't even have Zoom. So how are you going to mandate that they're going to have to record the meeting and have somebody come out to record it? Some of them are in the library and they don't even have any of these services being provided as it is.
So the language is pretty broad intentionally in the bill. It doesn't say you have to have Zoom or Teams or any of that. I mean, it could be as simple as someone pushing a button on a tape recorder. And so if the information, if there were no record retention requirement in this, would you be okay with the bill?
I think we could talk about it some more.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony this afternoon. We do not have the virtual presence, so seeing no further witnesses, that concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 1362 and concludes our bill hearings for this afternoon. Thank you, guys. We're adjourned.